After being with Victoria for 7 years, she told me that honest men don't understand romance and turned around to embrace the thrill of a young college boy. She was pursuing the excitement she dreamed of. This time, I didn't say a word to stop her. I threw away the diamond ring I bought for her and burned the wedding dress I had chosen. In the dead of night, I boarded a flight leaving New York. Her friends made bets on how long it would take for me to beg her to come back. Victoria laughed heartily and said, "Not even a day, and that Simp will be back." But day after day, I remained silent. She couldn't sit still anymore and called me. "Sincere, come back when you're done playing," she said, her voice trembling. A shy female voice interrupted her. "Victoria, you better apologize soon, or someone else will take him." Victoria clenched her phone, her voice shaking. "Who are you? Let me talk to Sincere." Yolanda kissed me gently and said, "He can't come to the phone. He needs rest. If it's important, wait until I kiss him awake." In the 7th year with Victoria, I bought a diamond ring and a wedding dress she liked, mustering up the courage to propose. But unfortunately, I was a few minutes late to the party that day and overheard her chatting with her friends. "You mean Sincere? He doesn't understand romance or fun. Being with him, everything becomes dull, with no surprises or excitement. Every day is just monotonous routine. I'm fed up. I need a life that's not so boring," Victoria said, sipping her red wine and shaking her head. 7 years of this, wouldn't you find it tedious? Life is about enjoying freedom. If every day is just about mundane chores, who would want a man like that? Even if he's handsome, it's useless. When you're upset, he just tells you to drink more hot water. He can't provide any emotional value. But Sincere is quite handsome. Remember his black suit at Victoria's birthday? He looked better than any celebrity. Seriously, Victoria, you used to like him so much. Can you really let him go now? Victoria replied without hesitation, "Girls, never give your heart to a man or hold him too dear. Otherwise, they'll control you completely. You have to keep them wanting, to always stay in control." Her friend immediately changed the topic. "If I chase Sincere, you wouldn't mind, right?" Victoria took a sip of wine, glanced at her friend with an almost imperceptible look, and slowly said, "If you like him, go ahead. Who cares about a simp?" The room erupted in laughter. That night, I didn't enter the private room. I made an excuse and went home early. Victoria didn't ask a single question and hung up the call. It was probably that night that my burning heart was completely extinguished. Within a few days, rumors spread that a sophomore was pursuing Victoria. At a friend's gathering, she brought him along. As soon as they entered, everyone fell silent. A few friends looked at me worriedly. I smiled and asked, "Why isn't anyone talking? Why are you all looking at me?" Victoria, holding the boy's arm, sat down looking very pleased and said, "Sincere, let's have a proper talk today." "I'm listening. We've been on and off for years and it's pointless. Our feelings have faded." I clenched my hand tightly, the hidden ring digging into my palm, but I felt no pain. Victoria held the boy's hand, full of affection. I nodded. "I understand." She smiled brightly and continued, "Let's just be friends from now on." I chuckled lightly, stood up and said, "There's no need. If we're breaking up, let's make it clear. No misunderstandings." Victoria raised an eyebrow in surprise and then said, "You're right." I waved my hand and said goodbye. "You guys enjoy. I'll head out." As I walked out of the room, closing the door behind me, I heard someone ask, "How long do you think Sincere will hold out this time?" 2 days. He seems really upset this time." "I bet 5 days." Victoria glanced at the not fully closed door, laughed contemptuously, and said loudly, "Not even a day. That simp will be back. It's always been like this." Everyone inside agreed. "True. Sincere can't live without you. Everyone knows he's crazy about you." I laughed at myself and hurried to the elevator. Back at my apartment, I took out the wedding dress she had liked for so long and burned it. Just burned it. The gas flame flickered blue and orange, licking at the edges of the dress. It curled, blackened, and emitted a nauseating smell. I closed my eyes. The flames seemed to turn into tiny dancing figures, joyfully mocking my life. Yesterday's hopes had turned into today's ashes. What was once precious was now a putrid mass, rolling into my nostrils, unbearable. I turned off the stove. Ashes scattered on the stovetop, faint red light flickering like remnants of past memories bidding me farewell. I shook my head and let out a bitter laugh. The wedding dress was never fully burned. I shook off my clothes and neatly placed the remnants on the bed we once shared. As I was leaving, I decided to leave her a note. I told her she could do whatever she wanted with the house and everything in it without asking me. I had booked a midnight flight to get far away from the city and return to that familiar town. When my buddies heard the news, they organized a get-together that evening. All the attendees were old classmates and friends. A few drinks in, someone else entered the room. Several male classmates immediately perked up. "Yolanda, what a rare guest," one exclaimed. "Yeah, Belle, what brings you here tonight?" Another chimed in. Yolanda blushed slightly and said, "I was just discussing something next door and heard about the old classmates gathering, so I came to join the fun." As she spoke, her gaze lingered on me for a moment before slowly moving away. A buddy of mine nudged me. "Sincere, Yolanda came for you, didn't she?" I forced myself to look at her. She was taller than Victoria and had a better figure. I stared for a moment, then shook my head. "I don't think so. We haven't been in touch for years." My good buddy ignored me and directly called out to Yolanda, "Rose, let Sincere take you home later. It's not safe for you to call an Uber this late after drinking." Yolanda's gaze met mine across the room. After about 2 seconds, I saw her nod. "Okay." My buddy sat down with a cheeky smile and whispered to me, "Sincere, why can Victoria be so fickle and you can't move on? Besides, a beauty like Yolanda is worth pursuing." "How do you know she'll want to be with me?" I asked. My buddy grinned mischievously. "Did you see how she looked at you? Trust my experience, bro." When the gathering ended, I accompanied Yolanda back to her hotel. As the Uber pulled up to the hotel, she unbuckled her seatbelt and thanked me for bringing her back. I turned to look at her and said, "You're welcome." I opened the car door to get out, but then remembered what Victoria had said that day. Driven by an inexplicable impulse, I asked, "Won't you invite me up for a cup of tea?" Yolanda blushed but silently nodded. As she opened the door, I looked at her again. "Yolanda, aren't you afraid?" Yolanda bit her lip, but her eyes were resolute. "Sincere, I'm not afraid." In the elevator, she kissed me. I was momentarily stunned, but seeing her flushed face, I leaned in to reciprocate. As we opened the room door, I stopped her. "Yolanda, if you regret this, it's not too late to stop." "Regret what?" she asked, looking dazed and slightly tipsy. "Why didn't you ask when you kissed me earlier?" For some reason, I saw a hint of unease and sadness in her eyes, along with a determined resolve. It pained me, and I gently hugged her without saying anything more. The night passed quickly, as happy times always do. On the 7th day back in this city, Victoria's sidekick unexpectedly sent me a text. "Sincere, when are you coming back to the city? I have no plans to return for now. Everyone misses you. Rachel's birthday is in a few days. Come back for the celebration." "No, you can tell her I'll send a gift." The other end was silent for a while. "All right, take care of yourself." In the private room, a friend handed the phone to Victoria. "Victoria, why don't you call Sincere? He'll listen to you." Victoria coldly looked at the few lines on the screen and suddenly stood up. "If he doesn't want to come back, so be it." "Victoria, don't be mad. Sincere must be feeling hurt. He seems genuinely upset." "Yeah, you went too far with that guy." Victoria pouted, a little dissatisfied. "I've already broken up with him. What more does he want?" Victoria suddenly got angry. "No one is to contact Sincere. Even if he dies, no one is to find him." All right, no one will. You just got out of the hospital. Don't get upset. You never had stomach problems when Sincere was around. He's only been gone a few days, and look at you now." With each word, Victoria's face darkened more. Finally, she stormed out, feeling even more agitated as the cold wind hit her outside. "Sincere, you've got some nerve. 7 days and not a single call or text," she muttered as she blocked my number. "You better not come crying to me." Just as I put my phone down, Yolanda called. "Sincere, join me for a hot pot tonight. You'll love it. I'll come to get you." Hearing Yolanda's clear voice instantly soothed my busy afternoon. She took me to a long-standing hot pot restaurant. The place was old and small but very popular. Yolanda, looking stunning and dressed to the nines, seemed out of place there. Watching her carefully wipe my chair with a napkin, skillfully rinse the utensils with hot water, and pour me juice, I couldn't help but remark, "Yolanda, your boyfriend is really lucky." I thought back to my own turbulent 7-year relationship, realizing I'd only ever experienced such care at the beginning. After graduating from college and living with Victoria for more than a year, I felt like a live-in male nanny. Victoria had a sensitive stomach, so I learned to cook and make soups, personally taking care of her daily needs. However, I now realize that I loved her so much that I lost myself, forgetting the principle that you need to love yourself first before you can love others. How could I expect her love to remain unchanged? While helping me rinse the vegetables, Yolanda glanced up at me. "Where did you hear that I have a boyfriend?" she asked. I was taken aback. "Didn't you always have a boy with you in college? It seemed like you two grew up together from childhood." Yolanda chuckled. "He's my cousin. We've been close since we were kids." "So, have you dated anyone over the years?" I asked. Yolanda looked at me quietly yet tenderly. "No, Sincere. I've been waiting for you all these years." That night, we returned to the hotel together. After washing up, I carried her to the large bed in the bedroom. Yolanda looked at me nervously, clutching my arm, not letting go. She murmured, "Sincere, I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Are you scared?" I asked. Yolanda shook her head, her eyes red. "No, Sincere, I'm willing." She closed her eyes and hugged me tightly. The happy times didn't last long. On Rachel's birthday, a mutual friend of Victoria and mine, I bought a gift and had a friend deliver it to her. Victoria sat on the couch with more than half a bottle of red wine already emptied in front of her. The gift for Rachel was a bracelet from a high-end brand that Yolanda helped me pick out. Rachel, smiling, commented, "This bracelet is quite delicate," but stopped praising it when she noticed Victoria's gloomy expression. Victoria stared at the bracelet. The brand logo was subtle and not conspicuous, but Victoria gazed at it for a long time. For some reason, her eyes became moist and a tear welled up. Rachel quickly pulled out 2 tissues from her bag and handed them over. "What's wrong, Victoria?" Just before the tissue touched her cheek, Victoria blinked with a bitter smile, her eyelashes brushing away the tear. She shook off the tissue, but in the last moment her elbow lost control, knocking over the empty wine glass on the table. The glass shattered on the tiled floor, shards scattering everywhere. A long cut appeared on the back of her hand, and the room immediately descended into chaos. "What's going on, Victoria? You're seriously hurt. The blood won't stop. You need to go to the hospital," someone said. Victoria sat there motionless, maintaining a bitter smile that still tried to preserve some dignity. She wiped an unnoticed tear from the corner of her eye, leaving a blood stain. She seemed to be talking to herself. "Sincere never buys this brand. This wasn't bought by him." Her voice was low, hoarse, and somber. Rachel quickly said, "What's the big deal? Maybe he just happened to pass by a store and bought it. After all, it's not your birthday. There's no need to be that selective." "Yeah, Victoria. What matters is your place in his heart. Everyone knows he cares deeply about you," someone else added. Victoria shook her head at this, asking, "Cares about me?" The noisy crowd inexplicably quieted down bit by bit. Rachel tentatively asked, "Victoria, should I call Sincere?" Rachel suddenly mustered the courage to take a picture of Victoria's injured hand and sent it directly to Sincere. Victoria didn't stop her, perhaps because Rachel acted too quickly. The room fell silent. About 10 seconds later, Rachel's phone rang. "See, I told you Sincere cares about you," Rachel said excitedly. Everyone noticed Victoria's expression softened a bit. "Victoria, answer it," Rachel said, handing over the phone. Victoria turned her face away without looking. Rachel eagerly said, "I'll answer it." She put the call on speaker. As soon as Sincere's voice came through, Victoria's lips tightened. "Rachel, what happened? Are you injured?" "No, it's Victoria's hand. You wouldn't believe how badly she's hurt. The bleeding won't stop," Rachel rambled on. The other side of the line remained silent. "Sincere, are you listening? Maybe you should come back. Victoria refuses to go to the hospital, and the bleeding is non-stop." Sincere's calm, deep voice responded, "Rachel, listen to me." "I'm listening," Rachel said, nodding and winking at Victoria. Then Sincere's voice came through clearly. "From now on, don't tell me about her matters." Rachel's smile froze instantly. "And happy birthday, Rachel," Sincere added, before the line went dead. Rachel was stunned, holding the phone as if it were a hot potato. She wished she could slap herself unconscious. What was she meddling for? What a mess she'd caused. The room was deathly quiet. Victoria said, "Everyone's gone mute?" No one made a sound. Victoria laughed. "Why isn't anyone talking?" "Victoria, don't be angry. The blood is flowing more now. You know Sincere's temper the best," someone said. Sophie, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly spoke up. "Actually, I've wanted to say this for a long time. What you did before was really hurtful. Sincere is a man. What man doesn't care about his pride and dignity? Even if you don't like him anymore, you should at least break up amicably." Victoria sneered. "Who said I want to break up amicably with him? He's been with me for 7 years. My best youthful years were spent with him. A woman's prime only lasts so long. Why should he betray me over something trivial? Can't we talk things out properly?" Sophie smiled faintly. "Have you ever thought about it? A man's youth is also youth. How many 7 years does one have? What if Sincere never comes back? What in this world is truly impossible? Once the heart is broken and turned cold, how hard is it to warm it up again? Victoria, don't do something you'll regret." After finishing her words, Sophie didn't linger. She picked up her bag and walked out. Just as I hung up the phone, Yolanda hugged me from behind. She buried her head in my back and rubbed gently, without saying anything. I couldn't help but smile. "What's up?" She asked, "Sincere, will you go back?" I asked in confusion, "Go back where?" "Go back to New York." I smiled, touched her head, and said, "I don't plan to go back for now, but who knows about the future? After all, I haven't done anything shameful. Why shouldn't I go back? My family is still there." Yolanda fell silent again. I then figured out what she really meant and asked, "Are you asking if I would get back together with Victoria? Would you?" I said firmly, "Absolutely not. Do you believe me?" Yolanda lowered her gaze, gently rubbing my cheek. "I want to believe you." I tightly held her hand. "Yolanda, I'm a man. I have my pride. At this point, how could I possibly get back with her?" "Do you still have feelings for her?" I thought carefully and said, "It wouldn't be realistic to say I have no feelings left at all after so many years." Yolanda suddenly gave me a light nibble to show her dissatisfaction. I gently stroked her face and continued, "But if I said it's reluctance or unwillingness, it's not that either. Breaking up with her didn't cause me much pain. So, maybe I stopped loving her a long time ago. Maybe from the moment she started taking our relationship lightly, I had already prepared for the breakup." Yolanda suddenly said, "I wouldn't do that." I looked at her curiously. "What?" She looked at me seriously. "I wouldn't be indifferent or fickle." Yolanda hugged me tighter, and finally she lifted her head and kissed me. "Sincere, be with me." But I didn't respond to her kiss. In the end, I gently pushed her away. "Yolanda, I'm sorry." "Why are you apologizing?" She looked up at me, her eyes slightly red. I turned my head to avoid her gaze and said, "It's my own problem. I don't want to talk about feelings anymore." "Then what have these past days been between us?" Yolanda's voice trembled. "Sincere, what do you take me for? A fling?" I couldn't look at her, fearing I would betray my true feelings. Yolanda's eyes were red. She let go of me, stepping back slowly. She seemed to laugh, but that laugh was broken. "Sincere, you can't treat me like this." Yolanda turned, grabbed her coat, and walked out. I subconsciously took a step towards her, but then stopped. Yolanda walked all the way to the door, When she held the handle, she suddenly turned back and smiled at me as if to comfort me. Sincere, I waited for you for 7 years. I don't mind waiting 7 more. I sighed. Sorry, I really can't promise you anything. Yolanda left. I collapsed onto the sofa, feeling an indescribable sadness. Yolanda was so wonderful and pure. Compared to her, I felt so dirty and unworthy. Even the thought of possessing H, you're the only one not married yet. I looked at him and shook my head helplessly. I don't want to waste anyone's time. I don't want to fall in love, and I don't want to get married. Sincere, are you even making sense? I said. I just feel like it's irresponsible towards her. I think I've lost the ability to love someone. He suddenly slapped me hard on the head. Sincere, when you were sending Yolanda back to the hotel, why didn't you say you were unwilling? Yolanda has waited for you for 7 years. You spent 1 night with her, and now you act all sentimental and responsible? You call this being responsible? I understand the concept of reaping what others have sown, but it doesn't make sense to torment the current for the past's mistakes. Sincere, I'm scolding you for your own good. A brother won't harm you. I know you might just be temporarily confused and unable to think clearly about relationships. Victoria wronged you, but if you do this, you'll be wronging Yolanda. You're just transferring the hurt someone else inflicted on you onto another person. Is that fair to Yolanda? I stared at him blankly. The confusion after the breakup seemed to dissipate with each scolding word. I was stunned. How did I get into this dead end? Why did I think this was being responsible to her? What have I been thinking these past few days? My brother continued. You've been pooed by Victoria for 7 years. You think you don't deserve true love and happiness anymore. Maybe he was right. The pain and struggle from the ups and downs of the past relationship made me subconsciously afraid of establishing a long-term relationship with anyone else. This psychological state gradually overwhelmed my rational thinking, creating a distorted value system. He slapped me heavily on the back, trying to wake me up. Sincere, do you know how outstanding you are? Honestly, this might sound cheesy, but since we've had a few drinks, let's be real. Since college, you've won scholarships every year. We might not say it, but which of our roommates didn't admire you? After graduation, while we were still job hunting, you already started your own company. Though you were quite the love-struck fool, learning to cook and make soup for a terrible woman, you're still highly sought after. That idiot will regret breaking up with you for the rest of her life. Now, call Yolanda immediately and cancel your flight ticket. Don't think I don't know you're planning to run away again. I looked at him and said, but do you think Yolanda and I will end up the same way? No. Why? Because I believe a sincere and pure-hearted girl who gets the person she likes would never be foolish enough to lose him. Do you think she's as stupid as Victoria? I shook my head. Of course not. So call her now. You can't imagine how happy she'll be. I thought about how happy Yolanda would be, but I couldn't have imagined that this pampered girl would be so overjoyed like a child when she received my call. My brother looked at me with satisfaction. So are you happy? I nodded. I guess you were right. I was being silly these past few days. See? You're happy. And Yolanda's even happier. Isn't that great? He suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Every time I think of how unhappy Victoria will be in the future, I feel so satisfied. I smiled faintly. Not necessarily. She might already have someone new. Let's not mention her again. At this moment, I could say this with a calm heart, as if that person had no more ties with me. When Yolanda's car arrived downstairs, I had just come out of the bar. She stood in the night breeze, smiling at me. I stopped and looked at her. I had to admit she was beautiful, fitting perfectly into my aesthetic. Victoria could be promiscuous, juggling 2 relationships without a care. But if I love someone wholeheartedly after a breakup, what's wrong with that? I walked towards her, and she quickly walked towards me too. Amidst the crowd, Yolanda and I kissed as if no one else was around. Her heart was pounding, and I felt the warmth on her neck. Yolanda, you have a fever. Her forehead rested against mine, her breath light and soft. "Sincere, I don't know what's wrong with me. When I touch you, I feel this way." I chuckled, kissed her lightly, and said, "Maybe you'll get used to it after a few more touches." Yolanda's ears turned even redder and hotter. After a while, she asked softly, "Sincere, what am I to you now?" I teased her, "What do you think?" She shook her head, then asked, "Friends with benefits or girlfriend?" But before I could answer, she buried her face in my chest and said softly, "Forget it, don't answer. I don't want to know right now." I gently wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her. The old tailor, whose ancestors used to be weavers in New Orleans, had long since retired and shut his doors to customers due to his age. However, Victoria managed to enlist the help of many people to persuade the elderly man to take on the task. The wedding dress that Sincere had accidentally burned was sent to the master tailor's workshop half a month ago, and today was almost completely restored. As she walked, she reflected on what Rachel had said a few days ago. It wasn't just women who yearned for marriage. Men also longed to marry the girl they loved. Victoria and Sincere had been together for 7 years, yet she had never seriously considered marriage. She never imagined that Sincere would have thought about proposing to her. She knew she had gone too far recently, but with that young college boy, she had only agreed to his pursuit on a whim. Nothing significant had happened between them, and she quickly grew bored after a brief interaction, realizing she still had feelings for Sincere. Thus, she ended the relationship immediately. 7 years of companionship had indeed worn her out. Sincere, being so reserved, never provided much emotional support. He was always silently doing things, silently accompanying her. Some people are like colorless, tasteless air. You only realize their importance when you lose them. Without Sincere around these past few days, Victoria couldn't muster the energy for anything. Even during gatherings with her friends, her mind was filled with thoughts of him. Especially when she returned home late, Sincere would always look for her everywhere, calling her friends one by one to ensure her safety and urging her to come home. If she was really stubborn, no matter how late it was, he would drive to the bar, pretending to be angry, and drag her back home. There was always a bowl of sobering soup waiting for her at home late at night. He would hold her in his arms, feeding her spoonful by spoonful, gently stroking her cheek with eyes full of tenderness and concern. At that time, all of this annoyed her. Now, she missed it dearly. Victoria thought when Sincere returned this time, she would be the one to propose to him. She had long known how much Sincere wanted to marry her. The master tailor's craftsmanship was indeed impressive. The wedding dress was almost perfectly restored. Victoria paid for the service and left. Suddenly her phone rang, causing an inexplicable nervousness. It wasn't until she saw Rachel's name flashing on the screen that her frantic heart gradually calmed down. "Victoria, there's something I thought I should tell you." "What is it?" "Don't get too worked up when you hear this. It might just be a rumor." "What is it?" Rachel suddenly felt a pang of discomfort. "How did this happen? Why, of all people, did it have to be Yolanda that Sincere was rumored to be with?" Victoria had a long-standing rivalry with Yolanda. 2 years ago, both top fashion designers in the industry, Victoria and Yolanda, competed for a spot at the Paris fashion show. Victoria was confident but was unexpectedly defeated by Yolanda, who won effortlessly. It was the first time Victoria felt something she was determined to achieve was snatched away from her. Since then, the two had been at odds. "I told you, don't get angry, it's just hearsay, no solid evidence. But someone saw Sincere in Hong Kong." Victoria's grip on her phone tightened, but she maintained a calm tone. "What's he doing in Hong Kong?" "He seems to be with Yolanda. Of course, it might just be a meal, nothing more." "I got it. If there's nothing else, I'll hang up now." Victoria ended the call, carrying the large paper bag containing the wedding dress Sincere had bought. She walked through the cold early winter winds of New York, all the way to the car parked at the end of the alley. Suddenly she stopped. A faint, mocking smile slowly appeared on her beautiful face, and in the next moment she threw the delicate paper bag into the trash without hesitation. 2 months after Sincere left, Victoria had sent him a message on Facebook. The message was sent successfully, but there was no response. The message read, "I'm planning to sell the apartment. What should I do with your stuff?" Maybe she had forgotten that Sincere left a note saying she could handle everything as she saw fit. Or maybe she just wanted an excuse to contact him. She thought this was her way of giving Sincere an opportunity to make amends. If he were smart, he would know to take that opportunity. Though she seemed bad-tempered, she was actually easy to appease. Sincere never replied, and the apartment was never sold. His clothes and belongings remained as they were, as if he had never left. Victoria would often come to the apartment late at night, lying on Sincere's bed, sleepless until dawn. 3 months after Sincere left, everything remained unchanged. Near midnight, Victoria dialed Sincere's number. In college, Sincere was an honest and simple guy. Although his family was ordinary, they were not in want. His parents loved him dearly, but were also very strict. It wasn't until the fall of their graduation year that Sincere started living with her. She still remembered that night. Both of them were so nervous they were trembling. When it was over, Sincere held her, looking serious as he said, "Victoria, I will never. I let you down. We were supposed to be together forever. I would treat you well, take care of you, and love you always." "Victoria, we were supposed to be together forever, right? But that Sincere who once thought he would always be with the girl he liked has been lost for a long time." It's been so long that she can barely remember the last time they broke up. What was his expression like? Was he nodding with a smile, or did his eyes turn red? Her phone rang for quite a while. Just when she thought he wouldn't answer, he picked up. At that moment, she actually wanted to say, "Sincere, come back." But what came out was, "Sincere, come back when you've had enough fun." Her foolish and laughable words were interrupted by a soft, feminine voice. That laugh was like cold, hard ice crashing down on her. Victoria felt as if her entire body was encased in ice, unable to move. "Victoria, you should apologize early or someone else will take your place," said Yolanda. Victoria's eyes turned red as she gritted her teeth and uttered the name. "Yolanda." "Yes, it's me," Yolanda replied. Victoria clutched her phone tightly, her voice trembling. She shouted, "Yolanda, where is Sincere? Let him answer the phone." Her emotions surged and tears fell uncontrollably, one after another, eventually merging into a stream. Every sentence she spoke brought more tears, yet she had to continue. She swallowed the tears that reached her lips. "Let him answer the phone. Make him answer the phone." "He can't," Yolanda said softly, lowering her head to gently kiss the sleeping man beside her. "He's exhausted tonight and just fell asleep. If you have something to say, I can wake him up for you." Victoria's voice stopped abruptly. Yolanda hung up the phone and turned it off. She lay down and gently embraced the sleeping Sincere. In his sleep, Sincere held her tightly. I did wonder what it would be like to see Victoria again. She comes from a wealthy family and is inherently proud. We parted on good terms. If we ever meet again, she might ignore me, or we might nod and greet each other. After all, my family and friends are in New York, and Victoria and I have some mutual friends. It's impossible to have no contact for the rest of our lives. But I never expected that the high and mighty rich girl, always so admired, would have such a moment of despair and helplessness. At that time, I was in excellent spirits, wearing a matching black cashmere coat with Yolanda, and we were laughing as we walked out of the revolving door. Then I saw Victoria getting out of a car. I was stunned and stopped in my tracks. Yolanda's warm fingers gently held my hand. Victoria's dress was a bit wrinkled, her makeup was smeared, and her face showed undeniable helplessness and regret. People bustled around us, and the music from the nearby fountain played cheerfully. This scene felt like a slow-motion movie, except I wasn't a spectator but one of the unsuspecting protagonists. Yolanda instinctively tugged at my sleeve. Victoria's expression gradually calmed. She called my name softly, just like she did when we were in love. I stood still. The cheerful music continued to play in my ears, but I felt an indescribable sadness in my heart. Maybe it was for the sincere who heard harsh words that night, or the sincere who was told about the breakup on short notice. Or maybe it was for the sincere who truly loved for 7 years but took only 7 days to completely let go. "Sincere, come back to New York with me," Victoria said, her gaze never leaving my face. She was unbelievably gentle. I couldn't even remember the last time she looked at me that way before we broke up. Victoria stopped about a meter in front of me. "Sincere, we'll get married as soon as we return. From now on, we'll be happy together, okay?" She spoke so earnestly that I almost believed that the Victoria who said she fell in love with someone else was just my imagination. But it's too late, Victoria. A broken heart can't be mended, and the new heart that grew in the swamp now belongs to someone else. I gently shook my head. "Victoria, leave," she panicked. "Sincere, I didn't touch that guy. We broke up in less than 3 days. The wedding dress you bought for me, I've had it restored by a master. I still have our wedding rings, and I had a diamond ring custom made. I'm serious." Victoria's eyes turned redder, and her voice started to tremble. She held out the delicate ring box like a treasure full of hope and anticipation, yet so cautiously. Looking at her, I couldn't deny that I still felt pain, but it was only pain. "Victoria, I have a girlfriend now." I tightly held Yolanda's hand and pulled her into my arms. The color drained from Victoria's face instantly. Her gaze slowly dropped and finally rested on our intertwined fingers. On our ring fingers, we wore matching rings, just like we used to. "Sincere, are you serious?" I took a deep breath and looked at Yolanda. Then I nodded firmly. "Yes, I'm serious." Victoria suddenly lowered her head. Lo laughed softly. "Do you think she's serious about you? How much genuine affection do you think she can actually have? 2 years ago, she fought tooth and nail with me for a designer position, and now she's clinging on to you, Sincere. Don't you think there's any selfish motive in all this? Do you think she would dare to say openly that being with you isn't just to spite me? Sincere, you're still so naive. We've been together for 7 years, so much has happened between us. Do you really think Yolanda doesn't mind at all? Do you really think she can marry you and spend the rest of your lives together? Aren't you afraid that being with her will just be another 7-year torment like it was with me?" The cheerful music stopped at some point, and Victoria's voice also ceased. There was a moment of silence in my ears, then a faint sound of something breaking, followed by an immense sense of relief and release. You see, I don't even feel that last bit of sadness anymore. It's just a pity that there must always be something to regret in life. Before today, I didn't regret loving Victoria. For better or worse, it was part of my life experience. But at this moment, I can't help but regret not seeing clearly for 7 years that Victoria never really valued me. Yes, I'm just an ordinary person, but she's a rich heiress. While I thought we were in a serious relationship, she probably just saw me as a plaything. Yolanda looked at me with deep sadness. My face was pale, but I still smiled and shook my head at her. "I'm fine." Yolanda stared at me for a moment, then suddenly kissed me fiercely. "Sincere, once I've made up my mind, I follow through to the end. I've never regretted anything, but today I truly regret it. I regret being so timid back then, letting you be tormented by her for so long. Victoria, you don't deserve Sincere's 7 years of love and affection." Maybe it was this statement that completely enraged Victoria. She had never lost her composure like this before, and she retorted without thinking, "And what about you, Yolanda? You found a man who was with me for 7 years. What right do you have to stand here and talk big? What do you like about him? Do you genuinely like Sincere, or do you just like that he was Victoria's boyfriend?" Yolanda slapped Victoria hard in the face. Victoria, not one to suffer a loss, immediately tried to slap back, but I tightly grabbed her wrist at the first moment. Victoria's face turned pale. "Sincere, you saw it. Yolanda hit me first." "Yes, she did," I replied calmly. "Miss Victoria, I apologize on behalf of Yolanda." I released my grip and firmly shielded Yolanda behind me. Tears fell from Victoria's eyes one by one. "Sincere, you're protecting her like this?" She hit me first. I asked calmly, "How would you like to resolve this?" Victoria pointed to her face. "Sincere, I'm hurt. It really hurts." I glanced at her and said calmly, "I'll call an ambulance for you. We will cover all the costs. Sincere, you know that's not what I want." Victoria tried to pull me, but I stepped aside. Sincere. All the emotions Victoria had been holding on to shattered. She looked at me with a sorrowful expression, but in my heart, there was no longer any wavering. Victoria said nothing more. The sunset stretched her shadow quietly. Perhaps it was when I called out to Yolanda, or perhaps it was when I first grabbed her wrist to stop her from hitting Yolanda, that she finally realized that Sincere truly no longer loved her. Sophie's question that day had become a reality. Sincere would never return to her side. She thought she was the one who could easily let go of the 7-year relationship. She thought she was always in control. She thought she would always win. But at this moment she realized that it was she, Victoria, who couldn't let go. Sincere was the kite string, and with the string broken, the kite lost direction and could never return home. I watched Victoria walk towards her car and saw her lonely figure disappear. The setting sun was suddenly swallowed by the horizon, and the sky turned a pale rose blue. Victoria's car gradually drove away, and it felt like the 7 years from when I was 17 to 24 vanished along with it. I knew that from this day on, the name Victoria would be just another ordinary name. I wouldn't deliberately forget, but I would never voluntarily remember again. Sincere, Yolanda gently held my arm. I turned and looked down at her, smiling lightly. "Let's go home." The night I proposed to Yolanda, I drank a lot. Yolanda also got drunk and said many, many things while holding me, but the words I remembered seemed to be the simplest ones. "Sincere, we will never have another 7 years like that. Sincere, we will never break up." Everyone must truly believe in their vows at that moment, but when they later break them, they wonder how anyone could believe in such things. But I choose to believe in Yolanda because I believe in myself. I believe that true love will not be betrayed, and Yolanda and I got engaged. That day I received a gift sent from the capital. It was a ring that Victoria had once given me. Inside the box there was also a card. The handwriting on it was Victoria's. She wrote, "Sincere, I will always keep that wedding dress waiting for your return." Yolanda, who was beside me, also saw the card. She said somewhat jealously, "Too bad. I won't give her the chance." But that night the ring disappeared without a trace. As for me, I no longer cared about such trivial matters. In the 3rd year of my marriage to Yolanda, she gave birth to our son Nick. Not long after Nick was born, Victoria sent many expensive gifts. I asked Yolanda what she thought about it. She said, "Our son doesn't need these. Let's donate them to the orphanage. She's getting older, not getting married, and always eyeing other people's husbands and kids. Is she looking for trouble?" I couldn't help but laugh. Why bother with other people's business? Yolanda somehow got happy. In front of a room full of maids and nannies, she grabbed my arm and shook it. "Sincere, what you just said sounded so nice. Can you say it again?" I teased her on purpose. "What did I say?" Yolanda pouted and said, "That thing about not bothering with other people's business." I found her so adorable and repeated, "Why bother with other people's business? Living our own life well is the most important." She was satisfied with my reply, and I then picked her up and placed her on my lap. I kissed her slightly flushed ear and whispered, "Our baby is 2 months old. Let's go to bed early tonight." Victoria's side story. When Sincere's son was 3 years old, their family of 3 returned to New York to visit relatives and stayed there for several months. We had many mutual friends who gathered almost every day, though I never attended. However, after each gathering, I couldn't help but ask about him. They said Sincere went to Germany for 2 years to study after getting married. During those 2 years, Yolanda traveled back and forth between Boston and Germany just to spend more time with him. Later, Sincere returned to Boston and started his own company, achieving some success. Yolanda unconditionally supported all his decisions and choices and always accompanied him as much as possible, without any complaints. Fighting alongside him, she could have been a pampered lady of leisure, but she chose not to be. Sincere became more and more outstanding, and Yolanda became more and more beautiful, yet it was more than just beauty. Their relationship grew stronger, and their child was adorably cute, much like Sincere when he was little. He never knew that I still kept a photo of him when he was 5 in my wallet. Despite New York being so large, the circles were small, but Sincere and I never ran into each other, not even once. However, one noon, I accidentally saw their child Nick in a buffet restaurant. He was hiding behind a rockery, secretly eating a box of ice cream, looking like an adorable little squirrel with his cheeks puffed out. My steps stopped uncontrollably, just watching him, unwilling to look away. After a while, I heard Sincere calling his name. He heard it too, his eyes wide with fear, clutching the ice cream box in a panic. Driven by some impulse, I walked over, squatted down, and asked him softly, "Are you afraid your dad will find out you're sneaking ice cream?" He nodded, his big eyes rolling around, very clever. "Do you want Auntie to help you hide?" He hesitated a bit, looked at me for a while as if making sure I wasn't a bad person, and then nodded again. I picked him up. He was small, obedient, and soft, lying in my arms. His little hands played with the accessories on my dress. Then he suddenly asked in a childish voice, "Auntie, do you know me?" My throat seemed blocked by something, bitter and dry, and everything before me gradually blurred. If time could go back to that year, that night, I wouldn't let anything happen. Sincere would be my husband. We would marry in New York, and I would bear his children. I raised my head, forcing back my tears, and smiled down at him. "Yes, Auntie knows you." "Then do you know my name?" His soft little hands hugged me as he said, "I'll tell you a secret. My nickname is Nick. I'm chubby, so my nickname is Nick." "Is that so? That's a wonderful name." I kissed his soft little cheek. "All right, we can't hide for too long, or Mommy will worry." He nodded obediently. "Then I'll take one more bite of ice cream, just one more bite." He took a big bite, smiled slyly at me like a little kitten. I patted his head. "Go find your dad now." I watched him walk away, feeling like I had just experienced an unreachable dream. It was long and beautiful, like fine, warm sand slipping through my fingers, disappearing in the wind. I didn't look at Sincere again. I feared that in the bustling hall I would break down and cry uncontrollably. Sincere wouldn't care about anything related to me, but Yolanda would certainly find my actions laughable. Yes, my first half of life was so ridiculous, so laughable, and yet the rest of my life, even this ridiculousness and laughter, have become unattainable fantasies.